Hello, hello. Can you hear
Right.
me? Yeah,
Yes.
nice. Still waiting for it to go live, but I think
Mhm.
think it's. Let's see. You on YouTube? Yeah, I don't know why it's not.
Mm.
Oh, there we are. Okay, cool. Yeah. All right. We are starting. We're going. We are talking about stories and story mode, particularly, and I think the backdrop to this is why we are leaning into stories for Uno. Why not just be a Farcaster client that just shows cast, lets people comment and like things, recast? Why do we need to have stories to begin with? And then um, the other piece is how can we find value and bring it back in to our own ecosystem? And Warpcast has its own ecosystem. Supercast has its own ecosystem. What are we trying to create? Erica, do you want to take a crack at answering the first part, why stories, and then the second part is what can we add value with? Yeah,
Yeah, I'll take a crack at the first part from my perspective, which is that stories provide a new type of media that currently doesn't exist within the Farcaster ecosystem. It's a type of media that bridges privacy and being public at the same time, since you have control over who is going to see that. Is it your mutuals on Uno or is it the whole network on Farcaster? And so, just thinking of it from that perspective, our hypothesis is that people will post very different content types when the visibility of said content is smaller than the entire network or is just different than what we're used to. So, with more content, you can get to know people better from a more big picture perspective, and that helps us from a discovery engine perspective provide much more relevant recommendations for you from both a content perspective and a you should meet this person or join this new group of people who share similar interests to you. So
yeah,
that's my personal take on it. Yeah.
yeah. I think people really do want different ways of communication. They want different ways of showing their content. There's not one size fits all for content on the internet. This is an example. A stream is a good example where it's a one-way conversation via video, but then it's also two-way with the chat in the sidebar. Um, Adding value back into Uno is really hard, right? Like we want people to feel like it's a nuanced perspective on content creation that you could not get if you were on Warpcast or Supercast. It's a differentiated experience that we get to um, compound over time. And I think you'll see this as we progress through the next year with Warpcast trying to be that global town hall. There are going to have to be cozy corners beyond just chats, and I think that that's what I'm seeing um,
Mhm.
at some of the groups that I'm a part of. Like we have lives. You know, some of those group chats are too big. Things happen too fast. Um, you know, the OG chats are gone and buried, and people have moved on from them. So yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's
let's.
another thing is the transience of those larger groups is because they're so large and there's so many people in them, a lot of people think that their presence is not as noticeable or their absence is not as noticeable. But then when you have cozier corners, you notice when someone isn't posting as much or isn't as active as much. And so that will help with Uno specifically bring people closer together and help create more opportunity for connection in
Yeah.
a social media or social network context.
Yeah, we want to try. I think you're right on about bringing people together. We want the ability for people to feel like they know each other in a one how the streams work in a one directional sense, where if you put your content out there, you should not be in a race to compete with other people on that content. Um, artists do not compete with each other on the sound of music. They usually just play their own sound and then just are cultured by some of the other sounds um, in the marketplace. We want to do
Mhm.
that as well. We want people to have their little cultures of content, their cultures of how they make things and where they make it.
Yeah, I
And
think that's a
stories
good
provide that.
yeah, that's a good, like, note to strike, which is, like, the difference between how a lot of traditional social media feels like it pits creators together because you are fighting over the same amount of attention, right? But that's also because you're being bucketed into a much larger bucket and you're trying to aim for millions of eyes when at the end of the day, having a closer, authentic connection with true fans of what you create, whether that's art, physical, tangible art, digital art like NFTs, AI art, music, whatever, that seems to be something that people are craving and searching for.
Yeah, it's readily apparent everywhere we go that the market is a function of whatever the token discovery is today, or the surface of that token today. Protocol led markets, artists and creators do not work that way. Normal people do not work that way. That's why it's such a grind to try and get your project out the door and get it successful. If it's token led, it's because you can't get people interested enough beyond just that singular token experience. They need something else beyond that. NFT projects are a really good example, where they started to try and coalesce people into different profile pictures. But the issue is that they couldn't see each other, right? They had to upload the image into an avatar to be able to quote unquote see each other. Um,
Mhm.
that's a that's a too much of a too small of a culture set, I think, to be able
Yeah,
to compound. Yeah.
yeah. The visibility thing is a huge space for here or for us to explore in terms of creator visibility. And I think that's what a lot of people are feeling in open social in general is a lack of more permanent potential or permanent opportunities for visibility, and that's where stories comes into play. So if you do want to screen share Uno, just to show what I'm more so pointing at is that the stories bar is always there at the top of the feed, right? And if you're a creator right now, regardless on what open social platform you're on, for you to guarantee that your followers see your content every time you post it, you can't really right now.
Hmm.
Your
Hmm.
followers have to sign up for notifications for when you post. Your followers have to, by happenstance, have your content show up on their home feed, whether that's a recent chronological feed or whether it's an algorithmic feed. But stories provide this area where if artists or creators always post content to stories, you will always have visibility in that top bar for people who follow you. And
Right.
I think that's a really, really valuable feature for creators who need to be able to take up more mind space in their audience.
Yeah. Let me give me a second, and I'm going to share my screen. I
Yeah,
just
no
need to
worries.
put up here. 1 second. Um, and then, of course, the simulator needs to run. Um,
All good. I can give a little bit of context to what we talked about this morning with stories and where we were thinking of going for improving how people can use them and have more control over their content. Um,
yeah.
So this morning during our daily stand-up call, this on screen is what Chris and I started to go over, which was the idea of being able to upload multiple stories at once, almost like uploading a collection of stories. And initially, this idea came through us discussing how you're able to upload 2 photos per cast. That's how the hubs are set up. And right now, with how Uno is built, you can upload 1 story per cast slash per Uno story post. So we were experimenting around make how could we open up the ability in Uno to post multiple photos per cast, but still keep the UI of that post within Uno in a place where it makes sense from a story UI perspective, because it's very different presentations. And this was a really fun UX exercise for us. So Chris, I don't know if you want to walk through the screen share since you have the mouse control.
Oh yeah, give me a second. I'm still having to pull up
Oh yeah,
the old simulator because there's
all
you can
good.
pick multiple. So let's see if I can put this over here. Yeah.
I think it's just us right now anyway.
Yeah.
But I'll talk through it. So what you can see here is the green is a user story group. So in this, the green would be represented by a user's avatar that you see within the horizontal story bar on the top of the feed. And usually what you would see is you just see a sequence of individual stories, right? If I post 10 stories throughout the day on Uno, then you will see 10 little bars at top and you just click through them individually to go next or back to go to the previous. But through us talking about how we could bring together posting multiple stories to the Farcaster protocol and also posting multiple images to Uno at the same time, we got to this concept of a story group, which is more of a collection of images that you batch upload into one group of a story. And so when you're navigating through stories, you'd navigate through individual stories within a story group or collection of images. And then once you finish that collection of images, you would move to the next collection from that specific user, still the same user. So this is an interesting way to think about uploading and categorizing in the moment content, or bucketing events that you go to, or trips that you take, or parts of your life that you want to show. So
I want to talk a little bit about that. Like I think the separation of identity. Um, let's take a step back and talk about like why people use social and how they use it. I think I got into a conversation on Warpcast 2 days ago, and the idea is that on Warpcast, people think that they are the same size, that they are more accessible, that they're more approachable. The group is smaller. Well, they're the same people that would exist on Twitter, that would exist on Instagram, that would exist on Reddit. We just happen to be a little bit closer to each other via the modalities of the applications that we use. And the idea that you can be as accessible to others as you would want them to be, like removing that fine line of privacy, of a boundary, I guess. Like we are in the business of making it easier for you to draw those within inside of the user experience of Uno. So all that to say, like if you have a user group, right. So this is a user story group, and we'll call this like Erica, for example. And she wanted to talk about her trip to Venice, but and then the next one is she wants to talk about her trip to New York on the back half of that trip. You probably would wonder, like, you probably want to make some of this private, public, or make some of this rational, and like as if you would have a conversation with someone. Or make some of this rational. And you can't really do that in today's traditional social media because the content type doesn't have logical ordering within inside the data that is sent to the network. It's basically whatever Instagram wants you to see and how they want you to share it is how it's shared across the entire network. Whereas with Uno, we're trying to adapt to how people already share things and try and make it easier and more logically understood. So a good example of this would be like if we were to pull casts back here, story casts, and if this was Warpcast, for example, let me see if I can pull this in. So Ted is here in token 2049. If this was a story on Instagram, it would just be 2 images. But Ted might actually put in 2 images here and then reply back to herself and have 2 more images, and then reply back to herself and have 2 more images. That's a lot of images, and that's a lot of story that would be in one logical set of data. And so we have to like adapt to how the network kind of shares things, less so how we want it particularly. And so this story grouping here gives us an opportunity to change a little bit of like how it is consumed while still keeping the consumption the same.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to highlight, which is that throughout our work on the user experience design and flow of Uno is we're not trying to reinvent the wheel of behaviors that people are already used to doing, right? If people share stories in batches for a specific concert that they go to or something like this, then it makes sense to build out a UX flow within Uno that highlights that actually and leans into the existing behavior rather than trying to change it, because we already have an uphill battle if we ever want to step outside of the crypto world for our user base. So why would we put a steeper mountain to climb already? And I think that's important for a lot of people building within consumer in general, which is focus on like putting the energy and effort and attention of your users into the new behaviors that you want to highlight. And that really makes your experience magical. Keep everything else easy and simple and almost invisible, to the point that it's second nature, that they can do what they're already used to doing.
Yeah. So to that end, like I think we're approaching this understanding of like a product like that has differentiated value from other experiences and even traditional social media too, right? We want to be able to differentiate as much as we possibly can for the appeal of each of the users and the viewers of stories. Let's talk a little bit about the algo feed and how that relates back to stories, because I think that would be a little like we're talking about making net new content on Farcaster, and then we're also talking about net new content on Uno. There is a in between of this, which is the feed, stuff that goes onto Farcaster that people can read. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the changes and things that we've done over the last week or so?
In terms of how the feed is populated or the UI work?
Yeah. How the UI work and the feed kind of pull together. Yeah.
So within the last week, all 3 of us, Andy, Chris, and I, did a pretty big overhaul on both the UI of Uno and also how content is delivered to each individual user. And so I'll start off from how we changed how content is presented, because that's probably the most noticeable and biggest difference in Uno for our alpha users today. And that is that we launched the first version of our algatorial feed. And when we talk about an algatorial feed, we're more so talking about an algorithm that blends both an algorithmic approach, where we just set up pattern recognition and take in some feedback from users through a clickstream data, and a curated approach. And this curated, more editorial approach, which is where the torial comes from in algatorial, is a certain level of tastemakers or a population of tastemakers that we know have good taste in content. And this is specifically visual content. And so the algorithm isn't looking at just who you follow, it's also looking at who this subset population of tastemakers is following, and then looking at that for more signals of what is good content that you as a user might not have seen yet.
Mhm.
And so that is how we're introducing a sense of novelty, but curated novelty within your own algorithm feed that is still for you at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also, I think, we want to make sure that the user feels like they are valued from their content consumption.
Hmm.
One of the things that I notice is that when there's so much token, in the attention economy, the token is a function of attention. The token
Hmm.
can be all of your attention, or it can be this part of your attention. And I can see that so many people um, want or need their tokens to be feed conversation. Like they're fighting in my feed for
Hmm.
attention. And so we want to value the consumer of the content as equal weight to the token, instead of it being what is essentially an uninvited guest into the feed. And
Yeah.
curators, just like hosts on a party, a host at a party, or people that are putting on shows, they have good taste on that guest list, and they don't want to invite people or invite conversations or invite content that is not something that gels with the expectations of the crowd. We want to make clear like that we don't have enough signal to provide the best user experience, which is we know you better than you know yourself. We want to get to a place where the curation step kind of goes hand in hand to the vibe and the cultural aesthetic that we believe to be um, critically acclaimed, if that makes sense. Like we want people to feel like what they're viewing and what they're seeing feels right, and it looks right, and it appears right, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Yeah. So some of the UI work that we've done, I really like how we've ended up in some of the dark mode aesthetic.
Yeah.
The backing of this, oh, we need to fix so we need to fix the button thing. The
Yep.
backing
On
of
my
this
list.
is super nice. I was skeptical at first that I would like it, but after test driving it in dark mode for a couple days or so, I think it actually is a winner. But it
Yeah.
takes a little bit of time to get
It
there.
does. It's heavier visually, especially because like the introduction of the Uno button, which we haven't talked about in a while, but it's also because we haven't built out features for it
Yeah.
yet. But the Uno button there, just for anyone who is watching right now and isn't familiar, this is representing special Uno things that you can do with content that is not necessarily contributing activity to the protocol. So you'll see that the likes and the replies are outside of the Uno button. So this is stuff that you can do that contributes to the Farcaster network. The Uno button, however, is Uno specific activities that you can do. So right now, if you open it, you'll see that there's a bookmark and a share button for now. So we haven't actually built out the flows for this yet within our code base, but that's coming soon. But you will be able to save things into collections and share stuff to messages within Uno itself. But the exciting part of the Uno button is going to come later on in our roadmap, which is when we start introducing different discovery models into Uno. So you'll be able to click the Uno button and
Hmm.
something like this, not specifically this since we haven't built out the infra for it yet, but if you like this piece of content, like being able to click a button that says, I want to see more of this, or I particularly like this. So giving our users a little bit more information on why they're seeing things and also control over, hey, this is particularly interesting to me today.
Yeah.
Um,
I think
but
also too, like this is probably where we're going to put like the dislike button, or like
yes.
I don't want to see this anymore button. That to me is super important.
Hmm.
There's some things on the timeline where I just don't care, don't want to care.
Yep. And it's different than muted keywords, right? Like muted keywords, as far as I know, and I can't comment on exactly how they work, but as far as I assume they work, it's through a direct string match. And so if I put a muted keyword of a topic that I don't want to see, but there's abbreviations for it or acronyms or different spellings of it or something like that, then I have to create an exhaustive list myself of all of the words that could potentially relate to that topic. But then
Mhm.
what if I'm missing content I actually want to see because they're using a similar word or a different version of it, you know? But if you're able through an algorithm to say, I don't like this piece of content, and through saying, I don't like this several times, the true pattern of what you don't like is able to be deduced. That's a much better approach to algorithm control, experience control for the users who are actually consuming the content.
Yeah. There's a theory about, the next iteration of applications and next evolution of experiences is that what you would expect, what, like, so if I had to ask you, like, what does Warpcast look like, you would
Mhm,
probably describe it as, you have the channels above, and then you have all of this below, and the conversations look like this. But the reality is, if you get really good at your machine learning, and you get really good at recommendations, then the content that you see is driving the application experience itself. And the
mhm.
best way to describe this is how most people interact with Spotify. So let me see if I can. I'm gonna see if I can pull up my screen for this screen mirror feature. I don't know if this is gonna work. This is actually brand new to. Yeah, let's see. Unlock your phone.
Oh, is this iOS 18 or Sequoia or whatever? The new
Yeah,
update? Nice.
yeah, I think it is. Let's see. Getting ready to use. It's connecting to the phone. Let's see. It might work. Let's see. iPhone mirroring will connect when iPhone is no longer in use. Does that work? Okay, cool.
Yes.
Yeah, cool. Look at that.
Yay.
Require Mac login to access iPhone. Ask every time. Yep, that's fine. Yeah, this is sick. So the idea here, I'm going to put this aside.
Mhm.
And this is a Spotify specific feature. And I'm going to see if I can, I don't know if you can you like make it larger? Make it full screen?
Oh,
I don't think you can. Move and resize.
oh,
No, I don't think you can. Well, that's okay. You guys can like zoom in. But the way that kind of like Spotify works is that you have this what's it called? You have like each of those. I guess it doesn't allow you to. You have to use your fingers or something.
oh,
Let's see.
I
Trying
think you
again.
have to hold down Option to be able to use the two finger thing. Is that what you're talking about?
Oh no, I got it. There we go. I want to scroll, but I can't scroll. Let's see.
What if you
Option.
scroll with the trackpad or like an actual mouse rather than how we're used to on the
Yeah,
simulator? Yeah,
yeah.
there we
You
go.
can't do that with a mouse. You have to use your fingers.
Yeah.
So the best way to think about Spotify is that it's actually UUIDs of songs, and so the UUID of songs is actually driving the UI experience. Well,
Mhm.
you don't get those UUIDs for songs um, without recommendations in machine learning to be able um, to be able to like show certain things. So, for example, if I scroll down to like here, new release, the new release for Dombrowski is just a song UUID, and then if you click into it, it goes into a page, and so this is actually a component that is being recommended to you, a user interface or an application interface that is being recommended to you that
Mhm.
is UUID driven. It is a song recommendation that's being driven to you. In the same way, if we look here on the left side, the cast for Warpcast like this and create to is actually what is being recommended to me. This is not actually being recommended to me. And so the whole component of this
Mhm.
renders, but the only thing that actually matters is this thing right here. So if we look
Yep.
at Spotify, if I scroll down and I go down to like Lakota Radio, or like, here's a good one, a really good one. Podcast is the thing that's being recommended to me. That component is being recommended to me. That's multimodal, interactive. Can't do that today on Warpcast, but might be able to do it tomorrow. All right, that's my
Mhm.
my TED talk on component design. Yeah,
Yeah, no, I think it's cool. And like to give another example of how I understand your spiel on component design is in some instances when an entire playlist is recommended to me by Spotify, is it actually because one song is there is actually being recommended to me, and then Spotify has extrapolated out and said, because of this one song, I think Erica will like this entire playlist. And the playlist is now the component being served instead of the singular song.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Nice.
we will see. What will happen is the stories that you post, and I think when we were talking about how we will design stories in the future, that
Mhm.
this component here, we actually are recommending one of the cast hashes in this story group, in this story
Right.
ID, and that because that's
Mhm.
where all of our engineering is going into for curation. As you curate more, like I love montage and I love burgers and I want to see more of this. Um, I would probably want to recommend this cast hash going forward, but in other experiences, yeah,
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that is a fun thing to highlight for how we're approaching our algorithm too, which is like, yes, you can recommend a cast hash, but you can also recommend an image. It
yeah,
doesn't have to be
exactly,
the cast hash, right? So if people are posting the same image 20 times, let's say it's a screenshot of a news article or something like that, we can recommend that news article or that summary of the news article or that topic. We don't have to recommend a singular cast, but then we're also able to go back down that tree and find the first person who posted that.
yeah,
And then that makes things really interesting too. And
yeah,
so a lot of our approach to this is, I think, summarized in one word, which is flexibility. How flexible is our recommendation system? What modalities are we able to recommend? Can we only recommend a cast hash? Can we only recommend a user? Only an image? No. And I
yeah.
think
And I
that's
think,
what makes me excited about building this.
yeah, I think a huge part of this is how good is your data understanding and how good is your machine learning pipelines
Mhm.
to be able to understand and recognize that. Um, b- 4 years ago, 5 years ago, there were probably 400 people, 500 people working with inside of a company um, like Facebook or Netflix that were solely dedicated on building out the pipelines, building out the ways of getting this information into the machine for it to learn and then spit back out those recommendations.
Mhm.
Today, we are able to do this with AI and probably only need like 10 to 20 people now. And most of those people are working on the platforming tools to be able to help screen and understand the data. Um,
Mhm.
every cast that goes through Uno in our hub is looked at with AI and then is downloaded or put into buckets inside of GCS, and we do some analysis on top of that, and then add it into our database. And soon you should be able to, as you were saying, if you have, like, for example, this is a text heavy image, you
Mhm.
should be able to, with a button, be able to curate that content. Like you should be context aware of the curation
Mhm.
step. Um, so
Yeah.
that's not too far from the future. Yeah.
Yeah, in that example, like, if I have a bunch of screenshots or product screenshots or whatever across my page of, like, financial reports or leaderboards or whatever, if I every time I see one of those say, "I don't wanna see this," we have the ability or, our AI system has the ability to recognize that you don't wanna see screenshots, you don't wanna see leaderboards, not that you don't wanna see images. Right? And so
Hmm.
it's also that level of granularity that we're looking at the same time.
Yeah, and I think there's Instagram and Twitter. Instagram and Twitter, well, Twitter used to be on the pathway to doing this at scale very quickly and having nearly instantaneous recommendation um, feedback. And for some reason, um, Twitter decided to pivot into content recommendation in the plainer sense and less AI sense. So I don't know particularly why they did that. I think they were trying to follow the same TikTok simplistic model of
Mm,
recommendations. But the Instagram way is the context aware in content analysis, in content embedding strategy.
yeah,
Like, for example, I'm gonna last thing about this. When you want to summarize a video, you have to look at every single frame of the
mhm,
video and then do a summary of all of the things that are happening on the video. Um, that's a
yeah,
lot of AI. Yeah.
yeah. I think that's a great topic for next stream, actually, which is maybe going a little bit more into curation tools and more of that seeing like an algorithm vibe, and how we're thinking about the user experience from having the algorithm as a stakeholder too, because
Mhm.
that's a very important it's a core part of our product. Um, it's the magic.
Yeah.
And yeah.
It might. It also, we could be getting ahead of ourselves too with that step.
Mhm,
It we'll talk about on Thursday curation machinery. Um,
mhm,
the more hands off you are for your user, the better off you are, which is why
mhm,
we want to go with an advertorial approach. Users just don't have enough time to
mhm,
recommend themselves better content, but
yeah,
we can because this is our day job. So
exactly, and that's part of the thinking like an algorithm or seeing like an algorithm, but maintaining the balance of stakeholders, right? Whereas, yeah, the algorithm may want a ton of manual input from our users, but our users are not willing to give that. So being able
oops,
to balance those 2 things. Yeah.
this is so funny. Every time I do this, it's just like
I
so
know,
funny.
it trips me up every time.
Oh, it looks like USV must have invested in Sonata because there. This is Jared. He's
Is there a response? Ah,
yeah. They've been talking a little bit more about Sonata. I would also not be surprised if they also invested in MoshiCam. So
yeah.
yeah, you
Well,
can
they
see
just
here.
had the Coinbase Ventures Summit last week in,
Oh yeah,
LA, I think. Yeah,
makes sense.
with, yeah,
So
yeah.
I need to fix this too. This needs to be a. Is it thinking Warpcast? Let's see. I don't think that
It's the mini
they.
version in comments or in replies.
Yeah, let's see. Jared. Let's see. Oh no. It's in the more replies. It's the bot. That's
Oh,
funny. That's funny. But yeah, you can see here this one thing that we need to fix is you can see the frame here is anytime
yeah,
it's in a conversation view, frames are collapsed in on itself.
yeah,
So
yeah, the mini version.
yeah. We are at
Nice.
40 minutes now. It's time to wrap up and we'll see you guys on Thursday. Any other
Yeah,
thoughts,
thanks for
Erica?
joining.
Yeah.
No, other than I've been having a really fun time building out all of these story features and just like cleaning stuff up, and it's been really fun building in public these last few weeks. And I'm very much so looking forward to continuing to do it.
Yeah. For real.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Bye guys. Talk soon.
See everyone later. Bye.